Hidden beneath the warm glow of chandeliers, a woman who owned more than most could dream of stepped into a crowded restaurant, dressed as if she had little more than loose change in her pocket. Her name, for that night, was unimportant. She wore faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, a thrift store jacket with the faint scent of mothballs, and to everyone else she looked like just another guest hoping to taste something special. She sat quietly, ordering the priciest steak on the menu, and the waiter who approached was a young black man named Daniel Hayes, 28, with smooth practiced movements, but eyes that betrayed a quiet unease. Still his voice was calm and respectful. "Excellent choice, ma'am." There was no judgment in his tone, no hesitation, and yet that was exactly what she wanted to see, whether her staff would treat every guest with dignity, no matter the appearance. But then the night shifted. When the plate arrived, something extra came with it, a small crushed piece of paper hidden beneath the rim, waiting to be discovered. She smoothed it open under the table, her pulse quickening as she read the words, "They silenced my sister." Her breath caught. She had built a culinary empire brick by brick, collecting awards and applause, and yet those 4 words cut through her success like a knife. She lifted her eyes to Daniel. Across the room he looked like any polished server, professional and steady, but then she noticed the tremor in his hands, the way he avoided locking eyes with the broad-shouldered manager, Thomas Granger, a man her reports always praised as flawless, but in person he seemed menacing, his gaze locked on Daniel like a hawk. When Daniel returned to collect her plate, his fingers brushed hers, and she felt the weight of his fear as clearly as if he had spoken it aloud. "Was everything to your liking?" he asked, his voice steady, his eyes pleading. "Perfect," she replied, folding the note into her palm, "absolutely perfect." But in truth nothing about this was perfect, because someone had dared to cry out for help from inside her restaurant. Someone believed tragedy had been buried beneath the empire's polished surface. In the parking lot under weak flickering lights, she unfolded the note again, the words alive with grief and urgency. Who was Daniel's sister? What had happened to her? And why risk everything by handing this message to a stranger? At that moment one thing became clear. This was no longer about fine dining, this was about justice, and she was determined to uncover the truth. If you're drawn into this journey of courage and truth, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what she was about to uncover would prove that even the greatest fortune cannot shield us from loss, and every truth carries a price. The next morning Evelyn Carter arrived at headquarters 2 hours earlier than usual, and her assistant Grace nearly dropped her coffee when she saw the CEO striding down the corridor with that fierce determination she hadn't witnessed in years, the same fire Evelyn showed whenever she prepared to take down corrupt rivals or expose fraud. "I need everything on Thomas Granger, manager of the Oak Ridge Prime branch," Evelyn said firmly, dropping a folder on the desk. "Professional record, finances, personal history, every detail, and also gather information on Daniel Hayes, a waiter at the same restaurant." Grace typed rapidly, then glanced up. "Do you have a particular suspicion?" Evelyn's hand tightened around the crumpled scrap of paper. "More than suspicion," she muttered. As she waited, her mind drifted back 25 years, when she wore the same uniform Daniel wore now, juggling 16-hour shifts between 2 diners just to pay for her business degree. And one night she witnessed her manager Carlo Benedetti pressuring a young server into degrading favors to keep her job. She tried to report him, but Carlo had friends in politics. No one believed her. Worse, she was fired for misconduct and blacklisted for months. That injustice nearly broke her, but it also forged her resolve to build a business where dignity always came first. Less than an hour later the first report arrived. Thomas Granger, 42, divorced, spotless on paper, but beneath the polished troubling details, an extravagant lifestyle far beyond his salary, and 3 employees who had suddenly resigned in the last 2 years, none willing to explain why. Then came the second file, and Evelyn's blood chilled. Daniel Hayes, 28, a business graduate with excellent marks, working as a waiter for 3 years, and the reason was clear. His twin sister Naomi Hayes had died in a supposed work accident at Oak Ridge Prime 2 years ago, a fatal fall in the kitchen during a late shift. Evelyn shut her eyes. "They silenced my sister." Daniel's words now carried terrifying weight. She grabbed her phone. "I want to talk to the 3 employees who left Oak Ridge Prime in the last 2 years. Today, track them down." The first call brought her face to face with Jennifer Lopez, a former hostess who agreed to meet though she sounded nervous. They sat in a quiet cafe tucked into a corner of the city. Jennifer twisted her hands together before speaking. "Miss Carter," she began cautiously, "I signed a confidentiality agreement when I resigned." "Forget the agreement," Evelyn cut in, her voice sharp but steady. "Tell me about Naomi Hayes." Jennifer's hands trembled as she spoke. Naomi, she wasn't just good at her job, she was meticulous, honest, never afraid to ask the tough questions, and that's what got her into trouble. She started noticing things that didn't add up, mysterious suppliers no one had ever seen, invoices with strange amounts, ingredients that weren't what the menu promised, and Thomas Granger hated that she wouldn't stay quiet. Evelyn leaned in. "What kind of things exactly?" Jennifer's eyes darted around the cafe. "Fraud. He was siphoning money through fake companies and serving cheap ingredients as if they were premium. Naomi figured it out, and when she confronted him he told her to stop digging or he'd make her regret it." Her voice cracked. "A week later, she was gone. They called it an accident, but Naomi was the most careful person I've ever known. She wore non-slip shoes every shift. She never rushed in the kitchen. And yet somehow that night there just happened to be a puddle of oil waiting exactly where she worked, an area she had cleaned less than an hour earlier." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Who could we tell?" Jennifer whispered bitterly. "Granger controlled the reports, the witnesses, everything, and we were just disposable staff. Marcus tried. He hired a lawyer, spent months chasing the truth, but Granger erased every trace. Then he even showed up at the funeral, shaking hands, offering condolences." Later that day, Evelyn met another ex-employee, Roberto Mendez, a former line cook, and his story matched Jennifer's, but he added darker details. "The money wasn't the only thing," he said grimly. "Granger harassed the women on staff. If they resisted, he threatened to fire them. Everyone kept silent out of fear. Marcus never left because he's been building a case piece by piece. He's been gathering proof for 2 years. But he can't fight this alone. He needs someone powerful." For the first time all day, Evelyn felt a sharp spark of determination. Daniel had chosen well when he slid that note under her plate. Back at headquarters, she summoned her legal and security teams. They would be her weapons, but first she needed more clarity, and she already knew how to get it. That evening, Evelyn returned to Oak Ridge Prime. No disguises this time. She entered in a tailored dress worth more than most cars, diamonds at her ears, her presence commanding the room. Thomas Granger nearly stumbled when he saw her. "Miss Carter, what an honor," he exclaimed, his forehead damp with sweat. "If we'd known you were coming, we would have prepared a proper welcome." Evelyn's smile was sharp as glass. "Don't worry, Thomas. I'm a simple woman. I only want dinner, and a chance to watch how my staff perform." Her tone made him swallow hard. From across the dining room, Daniel noticed her instantly. Their eyes locked for just a second, and in that look she saw everything, his fear, his hope, his relief. He knew she had read his message. He knew she was there with purpose. Granger looked like a man trapped in his own cage, pacing the dining room with restless steps, whispering sharp warnings to staff while forcing a flawless mask of hospitality in front of his boss. Evelyn noticed every flicker of unease, every strained smile, but she hadn't come just to watch. She had come to collect proof. Inside her elegant clutch, a small recorder captured it all: the nervous tone in his voice, the fear he spread among employees, the cracks in his false charm whenever her gaze met his. When Evelyn requested private chats with staff to better understand morale, Granger had no choice but to allow it. To refuse would have raised questions he couldn't afford. One by one, waiters, cooks, and hostesses spoke behind closed doors, their words painting a damning picture: intimidation, exploitation, a man who treated the restaurant like his personal kingdom. Evelyn Carter had not built a global empire by being reckless. She knew Granger was clever and dangerous. One wrong step and the trail of evidence could vanish, or worse, another accident might happen. As she prepared to leave, she stopped at Daniel's station, where he was quietly stacking plates. "Excellent service tonight," she said loudly for all to hear, then leaning closer whispered, "Justice may be slow, but it always arrives." Daniel gave the faintest nod, his eyes heavy with both relief and fear. On her way out, Evelyn glanced back. Granger was watching, his stare cold and predatory, and something in his face shifted, anger mixed with suspicion, like an animal realizing it was being hunted. The feeling followed her outside. As she slid into her car, she noticed a black SUV idling near the edge of the lot, tinted windows hiding everything. She started the engine, and moments later the SUV pulled out, shadowing her every turn. For 3 long blocks it trailed her at the same careful distance, and Evelyn, seasoned by decades of battles, changed her route repeatedly, weaving through side streets, testing, and each time the SUV stayed close. Granger was rattled, and rattled predators were the most dangerous of all. Finally she lost the vehicle in the chaos of downtown traffic, and as the SUV disappeared from her rearview mirror, Evelyn allowed herself a rare smile, not the cold smirk of strategy, but the sharp, confident smile of someone who had found a worthy enemy. Granger thought he had cornered her, but what he didn't realize was that Evelyn Carter had mastered the art of appearing vulnerable when it suited her, and striking back with precision when the time came. Daniel's desperate note had planted a seed, and seeds rooted in the will of a powerful woman who swore never to be underestimated again, could grow into something unstoppable. The hunt had only just begun. The next morning Evelyn woke with the clarity of someone who had finally found her mission, and by 5 a.m. she was already on the phone with Adrian Vega, one of Oak Ridge's most respected private investigators, a man known for tearing apart intricate corporate frauds. "I need you for something special," Evelyn said steadily as she authorized a $50,000 transfer mid-call, discreet, immediate, and dangerous enough to bring down a man who thinks he's untouchable. Adrian chuckled softly on the other end. "Carter, you know exactly how to get my attention." Meanwhile at Oak Ridge Prime Daniel began another shift. Unaware of how close danger had crept, Thomas Granger intercepted him at the employee entrance, his expression sharp with restrained fury. "Hayes," he barked, spitting the surname like an insult, "my office, now." The door slammed shut. Granger leaned across the desk, his breath hot with menace. "Last night the owner decided to surprise us. Curious, isn't it, how she seemed particularly interested in you?" Daniel kept his face composed. "I was just doing my job, sir." "Your job," Granger's voice turned icy, "your job is to carry plates and smile, not to exchange looks with billionaires, unless," he narrowed his eyes, "unless you're hiding something." "I don't know what you mean," Daniel replied evenly, though inside his chest tightened. Granger's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Of course you don't, just like your dear sister didn't know she was somewhere she shouldn't have been that night." The word struck Daniel like a blow. His throat went dry as Granger leaned back, his tone a razor blade. "Accidents tend to happen to people who don't stay in their place." Daniel now knew without a shred of doubt, Naomi hadn't simply died in an accident, and the threat was far from over. Across town Evelyn was assembling a coalition Granger could never have anticipated. Alongside Adrian she brought in Jennifer Lee, a federal prosecutor with a reputation for dismantling white-collar criminals, and Maya Torres, an award-winning investigative journalist celebrated for exposing corporate corruption. "What we're seeing suggests a pattern," Jennifer explained in a tense meeting at Evelyn's office. "If we can prove Naomi Hayes' death wasn't accidental, we could pursue murder charges on top of financial crimes." Maya flipped through the files Adrian had begun compiling: 3 sudden resignations, suspicious bookkeeping, a questionable death, and signs of embezzlement. "This is more than enough for a full exposé," she said. Evelyn allowed herself a cold smile. "Granger thinks I'm just another pampered executive who'll retreat when things get ugly, but he has no idea who he's really up against." The plan was layered and relentless. Adrian moved quickly to install hidden surveillance inside the restaurant. Jennifer prepared the groundwork for search warrants. Maya dug deep into Granger's shell companies and criminal ties. But the most crucial piece still lay with Daniel. He held the lived truth, the knowledge no file could capture, and for Evelyn's plan to succeed he would need to risk everything once again. That afternoon Evelyn slipped back into Oak Ridge Prime disguised once more as a simple diner. She ignored the hostess's polite insistence about other servers and requested Daniel specifically. When he approached she didn't meet his eyes, but her voice was low and deliberate. "I know what Granger did to Naomi. I know he's threatened you, and I know you've gathered evidence." Daniel's hand shook so slightly he almost dropped his notepad. "Tomorrow night," he whispered, "after my shift, parking lot, alone." Evelyn tucked a card beneath the wine list with practiced subtlety. "It's time Naomi received the justice she deserves." The card bore only a name and number: Adrian Vega, Corporate Investigations. That night Daniel stared at the number for a long while before finally dialing. The call was answered on the first ring, as if Adrian had been waiting. "Daniel Hayes," Adrian said, his voice steady. "Evelyn Carter told me about you, about Naomi, and about the files you've been collecting for 2 years. Daniel's breath caught. How does she know all this? Evelyn didn't build an empire by being naive, Adrian replied. She recognizes courage when she sees it. The real question is, are you ready to act on what you've gathered? Daniel thought of Naomi, of her laughter, her determination, the silence that replaced her after that night. He thought of the endless hours spent recording Granger's schemes, hoping someone would listen. I'm ready. Then tomorrow, Adrian said firmly, we begin the war, and this time you won't be fighting alone. Across town, Granger toasted his supposed triumph. In his mind he had cowed Daniel yet again, and the wealthy owner would retreat into her luxury, bored with playing detective. What he didn't realize was that every move he made was being tracked, every word captured, every ledger copied. Evelyn Carter had long ago learned that predators often destroyed themselves by underestimating their prey, and Granger was about to learn that the quiet woman he dismissed was more than a business leader. She was a force that protected the vulnerable and crushed the guilty. In his arrogance, Granger made the classic mistake of all cunning criminals, believing he was untouchable. But when you threaten someone under the protection of a billionaire with resources, you're not facing an isolated employee, you're facing an empire determined to dismantle you. By the time dawn broke, the trap was already set. Granger slept peacefully, unaware that the walls were closing in. On Thursday morning he arrived at Oak Ridge Prime with his usual swagger, 45 minutes early, inspecting every corner like a general surveying his army, but something in the air was different, an unease he couldn't name, like static before a storm. The first sign of trouble came when his assistant, pale and anxious, hurried toward him. Mr. Granger, there's a team of federal auditors waiting at the entrance. They have warrants. Granger's pulse quickened, but he forced a mask of calm. Auditors? What kind of auditors? FBI, sir, and journalists too. Through the tall windows of Oak Ridge Prime he saw the truth unravel before his eyes. News vans lined the street, Maya Torres with her camera crew already setting up, and his stomach lurched when he spotted Jennifer Lee, the federal prosecutor, striding toward the entrance with a heavy briefcase of documents. And then came the final blow. Evelyn Carter stepped out of a sleek black sedan, not in disguise but as the billionaire leader she truly was. Beside her walked Daniel Hayes, no longer the timid waiter, but a man carrying his sister's memory like a shield. My God, Granger muttered, his bravado cracking as the trap closed in. Evelyn entered like royalty reclaiming her court. Conversations died mid-sentence. Employees gathered instinctively, drawn by the gravity of the moment. Good morning, Thomas, Evelyn said, her voice firm enough to make him flinch. I imagine you're curious why so many important people have gathered here today. Granger tried to summon arrogance. Miss Carter, I don't know what kind of show this is, but I can assure you this restaurant has always operated within the law. Evelyn arched a brow. Always, even when you forced Naomi Hayes into double shifts without overtime pay, knowing she was struggling to cover her mother's medical bills. The name struck like a blade. Granger's eyes darted toward Daniel, whose expression carried grief sharpened into resolve. Jennifer Lee stepped forward. Thomas Granger, you are under arrest for murder, corporate fraud, money laundering, and extortion, she gestured, and 2 federal agents advanced with handcuffs. This is absurd, Granger roared, but beneath the anger trembled raw fear. You can't prove any of this. Evelyn's smile was ice. Actually, we can. Adrian Vega appeared from the back carrying boxes stacked high with evidence. In just the last 24 hours our team has secured enough to ensure you spend the next 3 decades behind bars. Maya Torres raised her microphone, cameras rolling, then pressed play on a recorder. Granger's own voice spilled into the room, amplified through portable speakers. Accidents happen to people who don't know their place. Just like your dear sister. Gasps rippled through the staff. Several employees covered their mouths in horror. Many had known Naomi, remembered her warmth, remembered how she always stayed late to help new hires. Jennifer Lee continued, unwavering, we also have the bank records, more than $800,000 siphoned through shell suppliers, each transaction documented, each false invoice traced back to you. The empire of intimidation Granger had built in shadows was collapsing in the light, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Jennifer Lee laid out the final blow. Detailed financial statements spread across the table, and here, she said firmly, are the fraudulent invoices you coerced Daniel into signing, blackmailing him with a debt you fabricated. Evelyn stepped forward, Granger's face pale, his hands trembling. The most ironic part, she told him, her voice sharp as steel, is that you documented everything yourself, every threat, every bribe, every dollar stolen. Your arrogance wrote your own downfall. Adrian Vega flipped open a laptop, revealing files recovered from Granger's personal computer. He had kept recordings thinking they would protect him if investigated, but those very files proved his crimes. And among them one stood above all, the call that sealed Naomi Hayes' fate. The room fell silent as Granger's voice echoed from the speakers. The girl is asking too many questions. Handle it. Make it look like an accident, just like before. Gasps filled the restaurant. Granger collapsed into a chair, his mask of control shattering. Employees, journalists, federal agents, all watching as the truth gutted him. Please, he begged, his bravado gone. I have a family, children. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady, heavy with years of grief. So did my sister. Naomi had a family. She had dreams, plans, people who loved her. You stole all of that because she had the courage to question your lies. Evelyn rested a supportive hand on his shoulder. Naomi didn't die in vain. Her bravery in speaking up brought us here today, and now the truth is undeniable. Two federal agents cuffed Granger as tears streaked down his face, his reputation, his career, his freedom, everything crumbling in minutes. I never meant for her to die, he stammered weakly. She wouldn't stop digging. Confession on the record, Jennifer said coolly, snapping her folder shut. As Granger was let out under a storm of camera flashes, Evelyn turned to the staff who had gathered, their faces a mix of shock and relief. From this day forward, she declared, this restaurant will change, not just its walls or menus, but its culture. No one under my ownership will ever again be threatened, silenced, or disrespected. She turned to Daniel. As for you, I have an offer. Will you take on the role of general manager, not only for this location, but for all of Oak Ridge? Daniel froze, overwhelmed by how his life had shifted in less than 2 days. Finally he nodded. I'll do it, but on one condition: we create the Naomi Hayes Memorial Fund, to support families of employees who face struggles like hers. Consider it done, Evelyn said without hesitation. At that moment Maya Torres stepped forward with her microphone. Ms. Carter, she asked, what message do you want to send to other executives who exploit their power? Evelyn lifted her chin, meeting the camera's eye directly. Justice may take time, Evelyn said, her voice steady as the cameras captured every word, but it always arrives, and when it does, the people you underestimated, humiliated, or tried to silence may be the very ones to show you where the real power lies. As the sirens carried Thomas Granger away to a cell he would call home for decades, Evelyn felt something more valuable than profit settle within her. She now knew her empire rested not just on fine dining or prestige, but on values safeguarded by people like Daniel Hayes who refused to bow to injustice. No one could have foreseen how this act of courage would ripple outward, changing not only the lives of those directly involved, but reshaping the way an entire company treated its employees. True leadership, Evelyn realized, wasn't born in boardrooms, it was born in the hearts of those who dared to challenge power with the truth. 6 months later Daniel Hayes stood at the doors of the newly reopened Oak Ridge Prime, now renamed Naomi's Table in honor of his sister. As the division's executive director he had transformed the restaurant into a place where dignity was non-negotiable and respect was woven into every shift. Meanwhile, Thomas Granger served a 25-year sentence for murder and fraud. The colleagues who once praised him had vanished, his family no longer answered his calls, and behind prison walls the arrogance that once defined him had been replaced with constant fear. Even fellow inmates scorned the crimes he committed. Evelyn attended the grand reopening, her eyes warm as she watched Daniel lead a team that worked with pride rather than fear. Naomi would be proud, she said softly, seeing joy and safety reflected in the staff's faces. The Naomi Hayes Memorial Fund had already supported dozens of struggling families, proving that a life stolen too soon could still shine light into dark places. Daniel came to understand that true victory wasn't about crushing those who caused him pain, it was about building something greater than they could ever imagine. His story proved that sometimes all it takes to spark justice is one brave soul willing to slip a note into the right hands. If this story of courage and determination inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove the truth will always find its way, even when hope seems lost.